Now, as we've been hearing recently, Tynwald will be considering making changes to the way increases in the Manx state pension are calculated later this month. Instead of the triple lock, those who've reached state pension age after the 5th of April 2019 will be covered by the Manx Pension Guarantee, which will ensure pensions rise either by Manx CPI or 2%, whichever is higher. Well, last week, Treasury Minister Alex Allinson joined us on Breakfast to discuss the reasons for these changes. But understandably, a lot of you have had questions since and are worried about what this means for you. So the Minister joins us again this morning. Minister, what kind of issues have the public been raising?
Well, thanks very much for letting me come back on, because this has actually triggered a sort of a national debate, and that's exactly what I said we needed at the end of last year. Now, I'm not going to presuppose anything about the debates we're going to have with House of Keys next week or Tynwald afterwards. But what we're really trying to do with this is preserve the National Insurance Fund, because we've known since 2007 that if we do nothing, it's going to run out, and that's one of the bedrocks of our reserves. And also it cushions, so it deals with those years where we've got more money coming out of the National Insurance Fund to pay for pensions than is coming in. So it's really important that we preserve that. In 2016, as you say, we created our own Manx state pension. Before that, everyone was linked to the UK. And so what our proposals do isn't get rid of the triple lock. For all those people who retired before 2019, they will be getting exactly the same as they've always got. But that's at the control of the UK government. They get UK CPI, they get UK earnings, and we have no control about that. And we've seen recently that various political parties in the UK have started questioning the triple lock. What we're proposing is for those people who retired after April 2019, who are on the Manx state pension, which pays £241.50 a week, we will guarantee that in the future to be at least 2% or the Isle of Man inflation rate. So we are getting control over how we pay and how we upgrade the pensions for Manx people.
Now, as you mentioned, this only affects those who've retired in more recent years. How big an impact is that going to have, though, when so many people who've retired pre-2019 are still beholden to that UK policy?
Yeah, I mean, we've got about a third of our approximately 20,000 pensioners on the new Manx state pension. So this is all about guaranteeing their pension into the future. The budget next year is forecast to spend about £365 million on benefits. Over 80% of that goes to pensioners on the island. And we have a range of other supplements and income support for those on really low incomes. But what we want to do is guarantee the pensions for everyone on the island into the future. Because if we don't, we forecast that the NI fund will run out in 2047. Now, that seems a long time in the future, but it means that for anyone now in their mid-40s, they need to be concerned about their pension into the future. And I'm absolutely committed to trying to preserve the NI fund going forward. We are not going to take £50 million out of it. We are not going to do any raids on the NI fund. All these changes are to secure the National Insurance Fund in the future, but also take control over the pensions for pensioners now and in the future to make sure that the Isle of Man government and Tynwald can guarantee they get paid.
So what happens if in the future the UK scraps the triple lock?
That's a very good question. And again, they've been talking about that recently. I was over in the UK and the BBC over there were very interested in what we're doing here. If they do get rid of the triple lock, then it will affect those pre-2019 pensioners. And then we'd have to see what we can do to help them through the other supplements that we offer to make sure that we preserve their benefits and their way of life. But these changes are really to sort of try to break that link with the UK, to gain control over our pensions and to be able to guarantee to the pensioners now and in the future that we have a national insurance fund that will actually give them the pensions and benefits that they expect and that they deserve.
Minister, we've had a text from Colin who says, I've paid full NI for 51 years, had to work later and retired in 2020, so obviously after 2019. So I'm losing out, says Colin. He asks, can you confirm that you won't be topping up the unsustainable public sector pension fund at the next budget in less than a fortnight now?
Yeah,
of course.
I mean, that's a very good question, because the changes that we're looking at, and in terms of losing out, we're still going to be saying we will absolutely increase pensions according to Isle of Man inflation. And of course, in last September, the Isle of Man inflation was 2.2%. UK inflation was only 1.7%. We're going for the higher Isle of Man inflation. Just to reassure Colin, this has got nothing to do with public sector pensions. This is to do with the Manx State Pension and the NI Fund, which is funding pensions for our pensioners. The public sector pensions, we've already made changes and will continue to make changes to put that on an affordable basis and make absolutely certain that those public servants, those nurses, doctors get their pension as well, but it is affordable for the nation.
You mentioned a couple of minutes ago people in their mid-40s. Well, I very much fall into that bracket. So for myself and sort of my age group, do we need to be concerned going forward? Because you mentioned 2047, only 22 years away. I'll be 67 then. Yeah. So for my age group, where are we at?
Yeah, and that's why we need to make changes now to preserve the NI Fund going into the future. So we've already agreed a number of things to make the pension scheme affordable. One of them was extending the retirement age. So you'll need to be retiring about 68. I don't think we should go any further than that. I think it's we've gone far enough in terms of when people can get the pension that they've paid into. But what we do need to do is put it on an affordable level, because pensions for pensioners today are paid by people like you who are working now. The NI Fund works as a buffer for those years where we don't have enough money coming in to pay out. And those years when we have more money coming in, that's paid into the fund, which is why it's forecast to increase. What I want to do is make sure it doesn't decrease, but I also want to make sure that you get your value for money. So the money you're paying in national insurance now gives you a decent pension when you eventually get to retire.
You mentioned when you were in the UK recently, there was interest from the BBC on this. We've seen some of the UK newspapers taking an interest as well. One of your colleagues, Minister Kane, has done a column in the I newspaper, and the headline that they've put on it, "I'm glad we scrapped the triple lock." Their subhead mentions the pledge has been scrapped. That's obviously not quite in line with what you're saying. Do articles like this cause a bit of confusion for the public?
They do, and that's I've tried to address some of the claims made in the UK press and by UK media that we're scrapping the triple lock. I said we are not scrapping the triple lock. What we're doing is absolutely honouring the pledge to those pensioners before 2019 that we will carry on. Their pensions are very intricately lined up with the UK, and we actually get pension settlement from the UK each year to pay some of the NI that they paid into the UK system. So that's absolutely correct. But for those pensioners past 2019, we want to guarantee that we and Tim will decide how much extra they get every single year, and we'll guarantee that going forward. So we are not getting rid of the triple lock. We are not raiding the NI Fund. We are trying to preserve the NI Fund and also guarantee that all pensioners, whichever scheme they're on, can actually have their pensions upgraded, and we have a national insurance fund going into the future that will fund that properly.
Now, I know better than to try and ask a Treasury Minister what's in their budget just a week or so ahead of the budget, but obviously we're talking there about the security of the NI Fund, not raiding that NI Fund. Looking ahead to the budget, how secure are all of the funds on the island going forward? Is it just NI that you're worried about? Obviously, we've seen in the last week an extra 800,000 thrown into the Manx Care Pot for their elective surgery. Is there enough funding to secure basically all of the government services at the moment?
Well, first of all, we're talking about extra spending rather than extra money going into Manx Care. The department will need to come back for a supplementary vote in terms of their overspend, and that will be debated by Tynwald in the future. If anyone's worried about the reserves, they can go on to the economic dashboard, and every month we upgrade those. And there's a lot of information there. The National Insurance Fund is 1.1 billion at the moment. I want to keep it like that and grow it, and our budget will show how we're going to do that. Reserves are currently 1.866 billion. They've actually grown by £60 million since this time last year. And again, we're continuing to invest that and top up those reserves to make sure that they are there for the nation. So our finances are in a relatively good position. Obviously, there's lots of concerns about the UK economy and the UK growth rates. Moody's forecast that our growth would be around about 3% over the next two years. So that's healthy. The budget is about putting money in people's pockets. The budget is about instilling consumer confidence, but also, really importantly, business confidence. And we've seen recently the changes to how we're going to introduce the minimum wage and living wage, responding to some of the concerns of our local community. So as a politician, I'd say we are listening. We really are listening. We went through last year the road shows, we did the government conference. We've tried to listen to people's angst following a very difficult budget last year after a really difficult time with high inflation.
Can I just jump in there, Minister? Do you think the Manx public feel you have been listening over the last 12 months?
We've been trying. But on the other hand, there are so many voices. And for instance, with the minimum wage, you've got the balance to be made between the public purse, between business and between the low paid. And so it's trying to get that balance right and then trying to communicate it, which is why I'm always quite willing to come on to Manx Radio and try to get that across. There are lots and lots of voices on this island, but what we need to do is take those into account and communicate properly what government are doing.
That's the Treasury Minister Alex Allinson.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Manx Radio newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.